Saturday Scrum.
Hello everybody, lovely to have your company. A Saturday afternoon heading towards kickoff, 3 o'clock. The Raiders taking on the Panthers. My name's Tony Squires, joined by Ryan Girdler. Wade Graham will be in any second, but returning gloriously from beautiful Paddy, we have Michael Chammas. G'day, Chammas.
Hello, Tone. Good to be back.
How are you,
Chamo? Oh, well, trip? I'm not tanned, unfortunately, but it was a good trip. It was a good trip.
Does look very tan. You've just taken your glasses off. Is that really?
It's just the lighting up here, boys. But no, I have had a couple of nice days in the sun. But, Chamo, I'm really interested to hear about Paris.
Well, I'll tell you what my highlight was.
Okay.
Rugby Sevens, we go and interview the Aussie boys after one of their matches. Dietrich Roach. And I was with Reedy. We're the only two there at the time. And Reedy, trying to look for an angle, as he always does, he turns to Dietrich Roach and he says, hey, you're strapping. By the way, what's the T stand for? And he looks at us, he looks at me and he thinks, is this bloke for real? It's the cross, mate. It's for Jesus.
Oh.
And,
no.
and Reedy just... It was honestly one of the worst questions I've ever heard at a press conference. He was just trying to find any angle. And, a lot of these guys, they have a cross on the strapping.
I know, when he was nailed to the tee.
Yeah, correct. One of your best, Reedy.
Oh, wow, Reedy.
But what was your moment then? Because there were so many moments back here in Australia watching what happened with those, the record 18 gold, all of those things, the ray gun at the back end. For you there, what was your pick?
My moment, I was fortunate enough to watch LeBron and Steph Curry do their thing and win gold for America against France. The crowd was unbelievable. Obviously, the host nation. They won. They came back from 17 in the semi-final against Serbia. So to watch those two moments, that was pretty special.
Are they kind of otherworldly, looking at those guys who we see so much and how fantastic they are on a court?
Yeah, and even just the sideshow around them, like trying to get down to the mix zone after they've played. And the media just turned into fans. Everyone's trying to take selfies. It's embarrassing, actually, just watching the media all try and get close to Steph Curry and LeBron James. But it is quite special. Even Djokovic, I got to watch Djokovic win gold against Alcaraz. That was just the emotion on Djokovic to see how much it meant to him, given that he hadn't gone to that stage before, won a gold medal. So that was the final frontier for Novak Djokovic. Pretty fortunate to see a lot of that. And anywhere where the French were playing, the atmosphere was incredible. The Sevens there against Argentina, watching that semi. I didn't get to watch many Aussies, unfortunately.
Yeah.
Just the way it worked out. But, pretty fortunate to be there in Paris for that.
Yeah, it looked spectacular on the telly. I can't imagine what it would have been like to be there in person. Very, very jealous, but great to have you back and straight back into the rugby league. What an odd start to the round, really, if you look at it. Manly led by 16, then they got chased down. The Warriors led by 12, they got chased down. Parramatta led by 16, they got run down girds. How weird.
Yeah, we're seeing a fair bit of that this year, Tony, aren't we? Sides just getting out of the blocks, and then, especially sides like the Bulldogs, they've done that in the past. We've seen the Warriors, they've been a side that have got out to really good leads all year, but just haven't been able to sort of sustain the intensity to go on with the job. So, but I was up here last night, went to the Broncos Parramatta game, and it looked all but done. 11 minutes in, down by 16, the Broncos just did not turn up at all, and then, they just found a way on the back of, I think, Adam Reynolds, the experience, and look, I think Kevy came out last night and said we will play finals. So there is a little glimmer of hope there for the Broncos. I think Payne Haas might come back in a couple of weeks. I'm not sure about Walsh or Mam. And even if they get in there, you build for a campaign, you build for a final series. And I just don't think they've done the work this year, the Broncos. But they're just one of those sides that if they do get in there and they put it together on their day, they could, as we've seen in the past couple of years, they could challenge anyone. But the Bulldogs for mine at the moment, boys. I mean, the way that they're just building their games, like their start last night, well, it was pretty ordinary. But given the fact that they had that away game up at Bundaberg in the heat, they'd done a fair bit of travel. They'd gone home, then they jumped on the plane, gone over to Auckland. Not excuses, but legitimate reasons why sometimes it can just put you just a little bit out. For your preparation, and you can feel a little bit flat, a little bit heavy in the legs, going from a real dry track like in Bundy to a real heavy wet track over there in New Zealand. But their composure under pressure, their ability not to buy into scoreboard pressure, and just have complete trust in their game plan, and I don't like the word, but their processes, knowing that at some point they are going to break you down. Yep. And when they break you down, they go on with the job. They are a very, very impressive outfit.
Wado, speaking of impressive, welcome.
Hey,
Tony, how are
hey.
you? Good. It's good to see you, mate. You're looking
Nice
good.
to see you. Thank
Looking
you, mate.
good.
You're
Good-
looking good as well.
good to have
You look a
Chammas
lot
back
better
in.
though at 11:45, but anyway.
Yeah, mate. That traffic through Brighton.
Oh,
an hour. It took me an
traffic.
hour to get here from Cronulla, but
Mate,
Traffic
put
on
it
the
in your
18th
voice.
by the sounds of it.
oh, Chammas, it's good to have you back.
It's good to be back, mate.
I've been petitioning for Buzz to come on full time. He's been outstanding. I think ratings have gone through the roof.
Yeah, I know. I heard you singing Up Cronulla with him last week. That was really good.
All right, what about some information in terms of the charge sheet, Chamo? What's happened?
Yeah, big news out of last night was the Stephen Crichton incident.
Yeah,
Wasn't
we'll get to that in
sin-binned.
a second, big time.
We will. But the NRL has handed out its charges. He's been hit with a grade 2 a careless high tackle, which means with an early plea, he'll miss next week's game. If he fights and loses, he will miss the last 2 games of the regular season. So I'm sure we'll have our opinions on that, but that's massive news. The other charges out of last night, Adam Fanua-Blake, Tavanga, Piakura and Campbell Gillard will all escape with fines. So the big one, Stephen Crichton, facing a 1 to 2 match ban.
Well, so maybe there wasn't a high level of mitigation in that tackle after all. We'll get to that one. That is the big story of the round thus far. This is the Saturday Scrum. We're doing it for King G Workwear. Triple M rocking the footy on a Saturday afternoon for you. Tony Squires, Ryan Girdler, Wade Graham, Michael Chammas. All right, let's get to what is the big topic. How was Stephen Crichton not sin-binned last night? What looked very much like a shoulder directly to the point of the chin of Roger Tuivasa-Sheck, who came reeling out of that tackle, couldn't get to his feet. When he did, he certainly had the wobbly boot on, and he was taken on, couldn't go back, and he won't play again this weekend while Stephen Crichton stayed on. Michael, so the situation now, though, is officially he does face 1 to 2 weeks?
Yeah, charged with a grade 2 careless high tackle. If he fights and loses, it's a 2-week ban. If he accepts it, it's a 1-week ban. Having spoken to people at Canterbury this morning, they're preparing to fight this. Now, I'm not saying they will,
Wow.
but they're doing their homework and they think they are a reasonable chance of getting it downgraded to a grade 1, which will constitute a fine.
Yeah.
Look, I don't know what you guys think. The reason being, I think they feel as though there are some mitigating circumstances. Roger falling into the tackle, the impact of I can't remember who the defender was next to Stephen Crichton at the time, but the impact of the other defender, and they believe that his hand was by his side and he was just bracing for impact. Now, look, on the surface, I tend to agree it might be worth fighting. Although they are a top 4 chance, a lot will hinge on how the Sharkies go tomorrow against the Dragons. Do you really want to risk losing Stephen Crichton for the last 2 weeks of the season? The upside, though, they have massive games to come. I think Cowboys, Manly, I'm not sure
Cowboys,
the order.
Manly
Yeah.
Cowboys.
Manly Cowboys.
Manly Cowboys.
That game
Both at
against
home.
Manly, that will cement them at least 5th spot. They'll get a home final in week 1. I think they're going to fight it. Now, as I said, I've spoken to them. Their gut feel at the moment, they're looking at video on the way to the airport when I spoke to them. They think they've got a case, but that may change in the next 24, 48 hours when they give the NRL the answer. Did you think...
The mitigating circumstances.
Yeah, well, the mitigating circumstances. Well, what about from the Warriors' point of view? Their mitigating circumstances. They have their, one of their best players, their centers, Roger Tuivasa-Sheck, ruled out for the game. Like, in terms of fighting it and match review committee, like that's always, in my opinion, a lucky dip. You don't know what you're going to sort of get at those tribunals. But like in the sense of a game, like if the Warriors are in contention for the 8, and from the letter of the law all we hear is high contact, forceful contact to the head, in the bin. I've never heard a ref say mitigating factors until this round. And again, I don't want to lay the slipper in to the officials, but all the fans, players, people involved in the game, they just want consistency. And all we've heard is high contact, it's forceful. He's obviously going off for an HIA. That's in the bin. That's been in the bin all year. Like what they want to do after the fact, the match review committee and to the Bulldogs, that's up to them. They can slow it down and have a look at it and work out their case. But in a game sense, the way it's been officiated all year, it's 10 in the bin minimum. And if I was Warriors, and it was an emotional night over there, Sean Johnson Stadium, his last game for that club on that stadium, I'd be filthy about that decision, comparing it to how everything else has been refereed this year. And
well, they were. In fact, we can have a listen to Coach Andrew Webster and what he had to say.
I'm struggling to understand how the shoulder can go into Roger's head and the bunker it's got ages to see it, critical time of the game. We lose Roger for the game, and then we've got to reshuffle our team. And like, you've got to reshuffle anyway. Like, that's football. Like, but if it happens because it just happens, but when it happens like that, and then nothing gets done to them, like, we've got to protect our players. Like, and I just don't see the consistency one little bit around that. Like, Roger will miss next week now. Couldn't come back. And their play goes on. That's it. That's all that happens. Just frustrated how that just happens. I just think they need to know what they're doing. Personally, I actually don't think they know. Yeah, I don't think they understand, because if they did, the wording around what they say just isn't clear.
Yeah, the high level.
Tone, that's a really big statement from like a really measured coach. Like, you don't see Webster come out and say things like that too often. And you could see how emotional he was, the impact that he thought that had on the outcome of the game. And Sean Johnson's obviously not over there, and the Warriors finishing their season strongly. So it was a really tough one to understand. Well, you can't understand it, but going back, I guess, to this situation that the Bulldogs find themselves in that Chammy was just talking about. I mean, I just don't think, I know on principle sometimes as a club you think, you know what, he hasn't really done anything wrong. But all season, we've seen guys go into the match review committee and come out at the judiciary and they've said, you need to lower your target. And Steve Crichton's probably he's about 6'3", 6'4". He's a big man.
Yep.
And obviously Roger coming in, and they're going to say, even though there's mitigating circumstances to the point where you're standing shoulder to shoulder to someone, you're a big guy and you need to lower your target. So so you allow for that. And I don't know how they expect players to do that. It's a really difficult situation. I look at that situation as like, I don't think there's much he could have done. But if I'm a Bulldogs official and I've got these, this back end of the season, I know that we've had a really good win about 3 weeks ago against the Broncos without Stephen Crichton. I know, he's the spiritual leader of our club. And I know that we want to finish in the top 4 because we truly believe we're a shot at the title, especially if we can achieve that. I don't think they can fight it. I think it's madness.
Again, Gertz, too, like, you look at it from a season point of view. He's played a lot of footy. I know he's missed that game up against the Broncos, but he was fantastic in that origin period.
Yep.
1 week off for him, in the scheme of things, to get him right for the back end of the season, it wouldn't necessarily be a bad thing. So they're probably weighing that up as well. And again, like, what they do now is up to them and their decision. But just back to Andrew Webster and his comment, like, everyone who was watching that game, the commentators, I'd say 90% of fans sitting at home who are neutrals, obviously not Doggies fans, they would have thought it was okay. But you're left scratching your head after a decision like that is made, because we've seen so many this season for these exact same thing, sometimes even less than that. Like, sometimes we see contact with a player and they get up and they're fine. Roger was obviously shaken, and when the decision comes back, you just on report, you see Barnett straight away talking to the referee, like, you're left scratching your head about how do you come up with that decision after, what do we've had, 25 rounds of football?
Yeah, I agree with you on the fact that the contact to the head, he goes to the bin. I don't know if that's a grade 2 though, Wado. And the Bulldogs probably would have, I don't know, maybe they would have rather him go to the bin and cop a grade 1. I just think that's the kind of tackle that 2 years ago or 3 years ago at Magic Round, you would have blown up saying, what are you talking about?
Yeah.
That's going to the bin. Now, obviously the standards have changed over the last 2 to 3 years, but I think a grade 1 would have been fair in that situation.
For me, again, I don't even care about the gradings. And in my opinion, whether I agree with high contact these days and they've changed the rules or changed the goalpost, it's not even my biggest issue. Like, they're going to always, you got to play to the rules that are set in front of you, and the match review committee, that they can grade it however they want. My thing is the consistency. Like, the decision-making around incidents on the field. And again, like Andrew Webb, like, the Warriors aren't in finals contention and they lose that game, but it was at a pretty important part of the game. If he gets sent to the bin and they score a try and they manage to get some momentum and go on to win that game and get into the finals, it's just the decisions and the consistency needs to be better. Like, whatever the ruals
a massive
are,
impact, aren't they?
whatever
on
the rules
back end of
are,
the
just
season.
do the same thing game to game
Yeah.
because it just leaves a bad taste in people's mouth.
Well, let's quickly change our focus to what happened on Thursday night with Ola Kawatu. And what grading was he hit with? And what's the charge for Ola Kawatu, Chamo?
I'll have a look at it now. So that incident on Thursday night, let me have a look here. I'll bring it up in the NRL email.
Because I got people contacting me, you know, who obviously it was a big game for Manly.
Well, they lost 3 to the sin bin.
And they lost 3, but
Yeah.
let's just talk about that one where, you know, he's a big guy. He got down low, like on a diminutive player in Mason. And I don't even know if there was any head contact.
So he was hit with a grade 1 careless high tackle.
Yep. And there was no mitigating circumstances because it was a one-on-one tackle, so no one else kind of got in his way. And I just think it was the contact that created the whiplash of the head. And sometimes that just happens. It doesn't have to be head contact for there to be whiplash.
Yeah.
It was just brute force. Now, if we're going to start giving guys 10 minutes in the bin if there's no head contact for tackling too hard, we have a real problem. Did anyone see clear head contact in that situation?
Well, when I watched the back, I thought the same thing, Gerds. I said, what? He's obviously his head rocked back in that situation.
Yeah.
But look, I haven't looked at every angle. I don't have the benefit of what the match review committee did. They've obviously then gone ahead. We've seen before people sent to the sin bin and the NRL match review committee not charge them. The fact that they have charged them, I haven't seen the angles they have. So you'd think there may have been some contact in that situation. And Ola Kawatu paid the price.
The shoulder involved. I mean, I don't mind the idea of outcome being involved. I mean, the outcome with Roger Tuivasa-Sheck should have been taken into consideration on the field rather than the mitigating circumstances that he may have lowered, several centimetres. I mean, Reece Walsh lowered several centimetres before Joseph Slightly hit him
The fact that Roger is in that condition shows there's forceful contact. Like, it's evidence that there is forceful contact. And there was another one in the Thursday night game where Corey Waddell came out of the line and he came across Paseka. He clipped the Tigers player high, but it was actually Paseka who did the damage with his shoulder. And then the language came down. He hit him with the bony part of his arm, Corey Waddell, so he's off. Like, that didn't even hurt him at all. It was the Paseka's shoulder. It's just, I don't know. And again, Webster, he was quite strong about, I'm not sure whether they know what they're doing. And at times, looking back, particularly over a couple of incidents already, we've only had 3 games of football. I'm left scratching my head with some of the decisions.
But you need to. It's going to be subjective. I know you call for consistency throughout a regular round. There's 8 games. You're not going to have the same person making the calls. Perhaps for the finals, that is the plan. The guy in the bunker or the woman in the bunker. At least you then get consistency because of the same interpretation throughout the games.
Forceful contact to the head. What is the ruling for that?
Yeah.
Well, obviously the guy yesterday felt as though there was some mitigating circumstances, and that should.
So this is Liam Kennedy, of course, who looks like he'll be stood down for the rest of this season, is what we're hearing. So not that it's actually official yet, but that's what it seems to be.
But it's interesting because, I mean, you've got these footy clubs, right? And obviously consistency is and systems is what they talk about. And that the most successful clubs are the ones that have implemented that best into their organisation. So why is it any different for the referees and, that whole different group that they do the training? And why should it be different? Like if you have a player that is injured and another guy comes in a footy team, he needs to do the same job. You can't have the same players on a weekly basis. So why is it not about the individual and why is it more about the individual and not about the system or the lack of systems that have been put in by the NRL at that level so that whoever comes in has exactly the same job as the person that was there the day before?
Yeah, but Gerds, what's your interpretation of forceful might be different to what Wade's interpretation.
Mate, Roger Tuivasa-Sheck was knocked out.
I'm not saying in that situation.
They need to tell me what it is. They need to show me examples of what it is.
Yeah, well, but that's always going to be subjective. I'm not arguing about Roger Tuivasa-Sheck yesterday. I'm just saying this whole notion of applying consistency is so hard to attain. It is impossible to attain because you have different views on what constitutes forceful, what constitutes mitigating factors. You're never going to get that consistent unless the person in there is the same person all the time.
Yeah, maybe it should be Graham Annesley because on Monday he comes out and says what's right, what's wrong. Well, maybe he's in for the finals in every game.
Well, maybe that's a good idea.
Yeah, thank you.
Genius.
Put him in the bunker.
Put him in the bunker for the entire final series. We'll make it happen. This is the Saturday Scrum. We're doing it for King G Workwear. Yeah, so nice to be with you on a Saturday, Arvo. And it was so nice to see the tears in Sean Johnson's eyes when he came out onto what was Sean Johnson Oval however they renamed it for the day. His last appearance at home, retirement, of course, he has announced at the end of this season. But just to see that emotion, you could see it, sense it in the crowd. It was fabulous. And then, of course, went and dropped the first ball. Couldn't see it through the tears. But wonderful. He's been a wonderful servant.
Oh, he's been fantastic for so long. He's been the pin-up boy for the Warriors, and some of the stuff he did throughout his career, particularly when he first came onto the scene, he really probably took the mantle or took the torch off Benji with the way he played, with the footwork, just the creativity, what he could produce. He was one of those footy players that could only had a certain skill set that he could do it, and not many people could replicate it. And it was nice to see the emotion come out of him. It's such, we talk about the week in, week out slog of the NRL, and sometimes you do get caught up in that grind, and you don't take a step back and have a look back and reflect on what you've been able to do in the game, and he can look back with tremendous pride and gratitude for everything he's been able to do in the game, not just as an individual, but what he's been able to do for New Zealand rugby league in general. You could just imagine how many kids would have been at the footy park pretending they were Shaun Johnson and chip and chasing or practicing a left foot or a right foot step with saying, I'm Shaun Johnson, I'm Shaun Johnson. And he's been fantastic. It's a shame that they couldn't get the job done. But listen, this year it hasn't been what the Warriors expected. But Shaun's made the decision to retire, and he can hold his head up high with everything he's been able to achieve. He's been a great ambassador, not just for New Zealand rugby league and the Warriors, but for the game in general.
They didn't win, but they did come up with the best sign of the day, probably the
that
competition. That was sensational because obviously his last game. I'm going to say it. I don't mind.
Are you going to roll it out?
I'm going to. Yeah, I'm going to.
It's a good sign
because when it comes on the TV coverage, it was, I think it might have been the Jazz Tavanga sign. What's that? Flips it around. It won't be the last time I play with my Johnson. Was the sign suddenly?
Very
it was
clever.
very
They
good.
have some characters over there, don't they? In the crowd in New Zealand, there's the Joker, and then Adam Woodsy's brother. He gets in and he sculls a beer when they flick up to the coach's box.
Boys, I find them really interesting to watch the careers of guys like Benji and Shaun, because they come in with this flair and this talent that's rarely sort of seen as a young man, where it's pure. There's not much thought that goes in it. They just get the football and things happen around them. Mm-hmm. And then you see it's actually they come in without having to do a lot of work like most people, but then they get to the point in their career where they need to change their game. And you've seen it with Benji, and you saw it with Shaun Johnson as well. And I've really enjoyed those parts of their game when it stopped getting really easy for them, when they slowed down a little bit, or when it became more dependent on them to actually get their team around the field, and it became about more of the team. Because I'd imagine through their juniors, whatever sport they played or coming through, it was always about them. Give them the football, let them get the result. And then at some point in their career, and we've seen it with those boys, where they have to go back in and go, you know what, it's actually more about the team than me, and they need to work on their game, and you see them change. And we saw that with Benji at the back end of his career, and I really enjoyed watching Shaun go through that over the last couple of years after he came back from Cronulla and had that bumper season with the Warriors last year. And it became about Shaun's defence. It became about his control, what he did for the team and not what he did individually. And unfortunately, he struggled a little bit this year. The whole team have to sort of maintain that trajectory that they were on. Yeah, but what a player. Just so good to watch him in his career, and congrats to him on all that he's achieved.
And Wade would know this more than anyone, but when Shaun left the Warriors, there are a lot of players who leave their clubs and they're not happy. And I imagine you would have, as hard as he tried at Cronulla, there was something missing for him. And then he gets the opportunity to go back, and we've seen it with a number of players over the last few years. You saw Robbie Farah and Benji Marshall go back, and how good was that to see them with the emotion there? Josh Reynolds last year doing it at Canterbury. And for Shaun Johnson, having his family go back over there, having his kids with him, and then to do that. And I know this year wasn't the way he wanted to, but last year, put the respect back on the name and go back to where he belonged. It's so good to see when those players get to do that. And some of those players don't get to do it. Like I imagine Woodsy, we sit here with Woodsy every second week. Like I'm sure he would have loved to have been out at Leichhardt Oval yesterday, even playing for Manly, but even heading back and finishing his career where he started. It's good to see that Shaun Johnson got that opportunity, because he was pretty bitter when he left the first time.
Yeah, have you just retired, Woodsy?
No, I'm just saying, like that would.
Have you just
how
retired
often?
him, Chammo,
How
have
often
you?
do Manly get to play it like that over? He would have loved to have played at that.
Well, he
at
might
that
play
ground.
there next year.
Well, he might, but I'm just saying that was a opportunity for
He
him.
was
But he's
very-
going to
Something we don't, Chammo.
Yeah, he's going to go with the Western Bears.
He's very generous as well. He said he sits here every 2 weeks with Woodsy. Woody's here every day.
That's good from you.
And you remember he is hosting a current affair this week as well, which is always
Is he back from the Olympics already? Is he with you?
He is. Gerds earlier talked about the Bulldogs and what they can offer and what they can bring to a final system. They just keep winning, and the second halves, they don't give up any points at all. It's been super impressive.
Yeah, they just know what they're doing now. They like before they get onto the field, they know exactly what their own job is. They know exactly what their teammates' job is, and they just go out there and do it. You have to give a massive rap to Cam Serraldo and what he's done with this club in the short time he's been at the top. But they're just full of confidence. They don't get flustered in games, whether they're in the lead or they were behind early yesterday. They just know what they're about. They know what their process is, and they just get after it together. And their defence has given their attack so much confidence. Like at the start of the year, I remember all of us were talking about how the pieces going to fit into that team because they weren't locked into their position. I know they had Drew Hutchinson for a lot of the time. Now Toby Sexton's come in, but they based their game on their defence. They got that in order. And once you get your defence in order and you know you can stop tries, well, it takes the pressure off your attack and it gives it time to flow and grow. And that's what's happened. Stephen Crichton has been fantastic for him. We've seen the best of Kickow come back out.
Yeah.
Like he had a lot of injuries last year. Even Josh Adokar, we've seen the best out of Matty Burton. Bronson Cherry has been outstanding. Connor Tracy at the back. They're just a really good team, and they are the good story of the year. You can't take that away from them. Last year we had the rise of the Wars and then the Newcastle run into the back end of the year. But to see the Bulldogs, the way they've gone about their business this year and the way, it's such a proud club with a proud history who have been starved for success for a long time. Yeah. The growth of the sport and the energy, like the positive energy, it's a real thing.
Yeah.
You feel it. You feel the momentum. You feel the support behind you. And they're just going out there and ticking all the right boxes.
And they do those things. You're absolutely right. They came out in the second half. That was a gale wind, and suddenly it was behind them. In the first minute, Matt Burton gets a 40-20, and you go, well, okay.
It's on again.
We know where it's going.
Yeah, and you don't search for that when you're playing good footy and you're comfortable just playing the game and playing through your system and your process. You don't search for the big plays. All of a sudden, an opportunity will present itself, and he's good enough to execute his skill. But you have patience in searching for it, even if he doesn't kick that right. They're happy to go on with it and just go through set for set, get into the grind, and then they just back one of their players to come up with the right play when they need it. And if they're still fighting for this top 4 spot. They got a couple of tough games. Manly, who they would need to bounce back after Thursday night, and then the Cowboys, who are also in that logjam. So if they can finalise a top 4 spot or even 5th and get a home semi at a core, wow! Just imagine the crowd.
Every year we talk about a Tone where 8 sides go into the finals, but how many of those sides truly believe that they can win the premiership? Mm-hmm. And that's the question. You've got sides that are going to limp in there. You've got sides that have had nice patches throughout the season that get in there, and they're kind of making up the numbers, and they'll never admit it, but internally they kind of know it. This is a side that I truly believe that they can win the premiership, and they are speaking the language of success. And anyone that listens to their press conference or anyone that speaks to Serraldo or whatever quotes are made in any sort of papers, it's all headed in the same direction. They're all singing off the same hymn sheet, so to speak, Tony.
Yep.
They are a very dangerous outfit, not on the fact of, the players, you don't look at the roster, but just of the way that they've built their season, the belief they have in the really important things around the game. And I would say at the moment, they are the most connected group in the competition. And that's a big statement because I know how connected Penrith have been and we know the Melbourne Storm guys. But there's just something about the love that this Bulldog outfit have for each other that is, going to really make it difficult for them to be beaten in the finals. Unfortunately, a guy that I think's had a fantastic season, I thought it was a great pickup, Kurt Mann, has got a broken collarbone. or he's got a fracture to, like, so, and he's going to miss, I don't know how long, but he's a big part of their attack, and that's a big loss for him. And he's a very physical guy, even though he's not a big guy. But other than that, they're flying in.
Just on Kurt Mann, though, I spoke to the Bulldogs this morning. They're fearing his season's over, which is a massive, massive loss for the Bulldogs.
Yeah, I can't deny how big a loss he was. He has been fantastic. But again, Gers was just talking about the officials before and the system and the expectations. They have young Bailey Hayward there. They have Moran and they have Jamin Salmon who can do that job in the middle. And the expectation for Cam Serrato is you put that 13 jersey on, you do the job that Kurt Mann was doing. And that is what a good coach and a good system will do. It'll bring out the best in their players. And those young guys who will step up and fill in for Kurt will no doubt do the job.
I think they can go pretty far into the competition. Like if they finish fifth, where most people think, unless Cronulla fall over in the last couple of weeks, they're probably going to play the Dragons in week 1, and they've had the wood over the Dragons over this season. They've beaten twice comfortably. Then, Wado, they're probably going to have to play your mob, Cronulla, if they go to Melbourne and lose to Melbourne week 1.
Well, I'm sick of everyone writing off Cronulla. Cronulla beat Melbourne in Melbourne this year.
Well, they might.
So
but I'm just saying
don't write off Cronulla,
Melbourne in
mate.
finals time is a different beast. I'm just saying
There's
the
a whole
Bulldogs,
hypothetical here where you're angry about. I love
they
it.
could be in a prelim final this year, boys. I think the Bulldogs will make a prelim final. And considering where they started the season, honestly, Belmore is going to erupt if they make a prelim final. It's
Huge.
Just imagine that. Dragons, Bulldogs. We saw how big it was just at Cogra a couple of weeks ago. Imagine if we get our crystal ball out, and that's the elimination final at a core. And
sell out.
What will it be? Will it be a Saturday night or a Sunday afternoon?
Oh, too hard to predict now. Depends on turnarounds and whatnot. But
it would
still,
be like you're thinking 65,000.
Oh yeah, it'd be unbelievable. And
That is cool. That is so cool. We get to the Broncos. Kevy still thinks their semi-final hopes are alive. That's next Saturday's scrum for King G Workwear. Gurge was among, I think, 36,000 at Suncorp Stadium last night who were a little bit in disbelief when the Eels rushed out to 16-0, but the Broncos came back, eventually got the money 30-24. Faith in what they can do is still held steadfastly by Supercoach Kevy Walters. Let's have a listen to what he had to say.
If you make the finals, do you think you can mount?
There's no if. No if here. We're going to make the finals. So.
Yeah, I guess when you do though, Kev, do you think you'll mount a challenge, or can you seriously threaten from the bottom half?
I definitely think so. But we're getting a bit far ahead. We will make the finals, but we've got to play well next week against Redcliffe.
Wow, that has the stench of coach whisperer.
we will make the finals. Then he talks about it. That's getting a bit far ahead. Well, hang on.
He can only look 2 weeks ahead, I think. Right. We're up to. But look, you've got to have that faith, and you've got to display that faith not just to your team, I guess, to the fan base, corporates, whatever it is. But it's a hard road, isn't it, for them to get to the finals? They've obviously done that, but something like the Dragons, who'll be saying the same thing, we're going to get to the finals. They're a roadblock at the moment.
Yeah, I think. Again, from your first comment, he has to hold that line. You've got to be talking internally to your players, still believe, motivating your players. So publicly, he has to hold that line. I think, listen, what do they need? The Dragons to fall over, to lose 2 games coming home? If the Dragons win 1 more?
Yeah, they're 2 points behind the Dragons, but their for and against is a lot better than the Dragons. So if they can get the win on the Dragons, if the Dragons lose to the Sharks and they win... Well, the Dragons have to lose 2 games.
Yeah, the Dragons have to lose 2 games. Okay, so they need results to go their way from other clubs, which is never an enviable position to be in. But I know if just say hypothetically they do make the finals and Haas is not back for the rest of the year. He's out.
They're talking week 1 of the finals for Haas and maybe last round for Reece Walsh.
And Mam?
I think he's in the same category as Reece Walsh.
Listen, if you say they get everyone back on deck and they're fully fit for week 1 of the final, they are still a scary proposition to come up against because they're dangerous. With Adam Reynolds in the team steering the shift, they're dangerous with the amount of flair and attack they can produce, particularly Reece Walsh, Ezra Mam, Katoni Staggs is back looking great. Carrigan is as good a forward in the competition. We all know how good Payne is, and you wouldn't want to come up against them in a final just because they'd be such a wild card. They feel like they've had a second chance at the season.
Yep.
Well, really, that's what it would be if somehow they do jag a spot. But
Yeah.
Yeah, they got the Dolphins and the Storm coming up, so yeah, it's
and depending on whether the Storm rest players, so there's a lot needs to go their way. But again, just hypothetically, they do get there. They're a dangerous team on their night, and even last night, whether it was a combination of Parramatta starting really fast and Brisbane starting a bit slow. Once they got into the grind of the field of the footy, and there was more ball in play, and the fatigue start to set in, they're still a powerful team. They're young, they're aggressive, and they back themselves. And when they have the momentum, they're a hard team to stop. Now you add their superstars back into that mix, and somehow they jag a spot in 8. They'd be a daunting task in a semi-final.
Tristan Saylor had his best game, I think, of the year. Can you believe it's 5 years since he scored a try in the NRL?
What?
5 years is what they were saying last night.
We're heading into Alex Twal territories.
Yeah,
that was a good one.
Absolutely.
That was a good one he scored last night.
It was a terrific try, and that's why you wonder, how can that possibly be the case? Yeah, his best.
Yep.
He'll light it up at St Helens, you'd imagine, when he gets over there into the Super League with that kind of the pace that he does have. So sitting in the stands there, Gerds, was the disbelieving crowd suddenly won over? Reynolds obviously did his trick in the back end.
Well, the opening 11 minutes, I think I probably had maybe 8 or 9 oysters. I was in the corporate suite, so there was some prawns up there. Probably so. And there was a long line. We're in the captain's room, so it was a bit of a long line. So I did miss the opening 11 minutes, and by the time I got out there, it was almost time to go back to have the main. So I missed the comeback by the Broncos. But I'll tell you what. For the listeners, we had some of our corporate partners came up and spent a couple of days in Brisbane, and it was a little junket, and I go on it every year, and it's really good people, got some great, really loyal corporate partners in Ream and Prosper and Harvey Norman, and Tommy Hackett was there from Ladbrokes. He got burnt by the pool yesterday.
Oh, did he?
But just taking people that. Some people are from Melbourne, they're not all that invested in rugby league, and putting them in Suncorp Stadium is a really experience. And it was really good to see that, because the Broncos, although everyone kind of thought their season was almost over, it's on a knife's edge, they had 37,000 people there. And, they love their footy. And, usually when I'm there, I'm commentating, and I'm not really involved in what's going on away from it. But, they loved it. And every try, they all get up and they dance, and Buck runs around. So it's always like a real carnival atmosphere there. And it was a fantastic night. But, Parramatta just, when those moments came, I really didn't understand why they kicked for goal. They were 4 points up. I'm not sure. I think that was in maybe the back end of the first half or early in the second half. And I was like, it's not like you're not going to defend the lead.
Yes.
The Broncos are going to come at you. You need to try and score some points and kick away here. So I thought that was strange. And then obviously the Tuolangi charged down, they're 15 metres out from their line. The Broncos been a really good defensive set by Parramatta. Game's on the line, and an edge back rower, not thinking, just runs out and does a charge down, hands them the football back, and they get down the other end of the field. And then, unfortunately, Mike Acevo, he's just had that sort of career over the last couple of years for the Eels fans. He's rocks or diamonds, and we saw both last night. He had some nice moments, but some of the errors he made, and then you had, the Penasini. When two centres try and pass the ball to each other coming out of yardage, it's trouble. And that's what we saw with, obviously, Penasini and young Blaze Talangi, and the intercept there for Reynolds. And he just steadied the ship. Renault, he didn't panic when they got behind, and did some really nice things, had some nice touches, and that was enough for the Broncos just to find a way. But I know, Wader, you can build a case for the Broncos individually, that they could do something in the finals, but just collectively as a team and as a club and an organisation at the moment, I just don't think they're a serious threat at all.
Well, that's been their issue all year, right? They just haven't found that same connection as a team that they had last year. And again, when you are searching for that form, you do sort of go to your individual strength. We're just giving the Bulldogs a rap about how they're just happy and they're patient to just stay with their football, and they're confident within that. When the Broncos sort of feel under pressure, you tend to see guys try to handle the situation on their own and come up with a play on their own rather than work through it as a team. And that might win you a game every now and again off the back of individual brilliance, but consistently it won't hold you in good stead when you come up against those top teams where they have everyone doing their job. And when you just mentioned Tristan Saylor before, it just made me think quickly throughout this season. Have we ever seen, so much opportunity for backup fullbacks come and excel? Tristan's always going to probably be behind Reece there. That's why he's going over to England. But he comes in, he's a fantastic player. We saw the emergence of Trey Fuller when the hammer was out. Even young Mason Heath the other night for the Tigers coming in. Far Logo down at Melbourne when he gets an opportunity. It's just that fullback position, unless you know, there is so many talented guys.
Yeah, young Keeney's forced his way with Brimson being injured.
There's just so many talented guys that are probably sitting behind the top flight fullback because of how brilliant that position is. It's great to watch those young guys get an opportunity and excel in the top grade.
Well, even talking about Parramatta, they're the one that have invested in Isaiah Iongi from Penrith. He obviously got his opportunity a couple of weeks ago, and they've spent decent money on alluring him across. I think it's around $400,000 a season it averages out for Iongi. So they've obviously looked at him and thought he could be our number one. What do you do with Gutho then? I don't think it's the last we've heard about Gutho potentially. I'm not saying he has been tapped, but I think there's going to be some murmurs. I think Gus alluded to it the other day on his podcast that there's going to be there are some clubs inquiring about what's happening with Clint Gutherson. So, and the one you mentioned is far longer at Melbourne because there is an agreement between Matt Tripp, the Storm chairman, and Farlongo's agent, Liam Ayub, that if Ryan Pappenhausen was to re-sign, they were going to sit down and look at what that means for him going forward. And that could potentially mean him on the open market.
Scrum.
Tony Squires, Ryan Girdler, Wade Graham and Michael Chammas with you. The Raiders and the Panthers just under 2 hours before kickoff. You'll hear it right here on Triple M. The game so far, the Tigers 34 over the Seagulls 26. The Bulldogs 34, the Wars 10, and of course Broncos came back 30-24 over the Eels. All right, now Michael Chammas, what is the latest on Latrell Mitchell? What punishments are lined up for him? When will all that come through?
Yeah, so he's accepted the NRL's breach notice, the imposed fine of $20,000 and a one-game ban. He's accepted that. The NRL now deliberate over the next few days and work out when that one game is going to be served. In the meantime, he's been served a breach notice by South Sydney, and in the next few days, he will meet the South Sydney board. He'll have to front the South Sydney board and give his explanation as to what happened. Now, South Sydney will impose, from what I gather, their own fine. I think Reedy said it could be up to a $250,000. I don't know if it'll be that high, but it will be a significant whack because they obviously...
Well, they have the power to do that, is it?
That's what Reedy wrote, that they have the power to fine him up to that much. It won't be that much.
No way.
No, it won't be that much. But I think there are some people there who feel as though this is the final straw with Latrell. I don't know if they can go to the extent of actually redoing his contract and inserting clauses. I don't think that's possible. But by serving the breach notice, it acts as a warning that if something like this does happen in the future, they may be able to terminate his deal.
Chamo, Buzz was saying last week, correct me if I'm mistaken here, Tone, that they could actually insert those clauses into Latrell's contract moving forward.
Well, he'd have to agree.
It'd have to be
it.
voluntary. He'd have to agree, and his management would have to agree to basically redo the contract, right?
Well, I don't. If you're his manager,
you're not agreeing.
You're not agreeing to that. But what you are agreeing to, well, really, you don't even have to agree to it. Is reality is you're going to be breached for this situation, which means if you step out of line again. And they want to terminate your contract, they probably have good grounds to do so. Now, we had the issue with Taylor May a few months ago at Penrith. There isn't a set amount of breaches that is required for a club to part ways with a player. I remember with Todd Carney years ago, he was able to get Cronulla on unfair dismissal. And with the Taylor May situation, they went back retrospectively and they said even before we re-signed you, there were some breaches that we were able to bring up and try and execute as part of this decision to part ways with you. Now, in the end, they weren't able to. They came to an agreement. They paid Taylor May a certain amount, which wasn't disclosed, and they moved on. With Latrell Mitchell, obviously the photo is there. They won't be able to bring in on-field issues. Now, Latrell Mitchell has had a lot of on-field issues, which he's paid the price for. He's been suspended a number of times. And he hasn't had a lot of issues off-field, boys. Like, I know we had that incident with Jack Wyden, but he wasn't.
Yeah.
He was found not guilty in that situation. And all the criticism of Latrell really have been on-field issues. That Sean Johnson incident, a lot of issues with him, his temper on field.
The post-game swearing in the interview, of course, on
there was that as well. And at the time, South Sydney were defending him, if you remember. So they were saying that it was Triple M's fault at the time. So,
which might have been half the problem.
Well, that's the point some of the other commentators in the game have made. I think Gal said on 100% footy and Phil Gould said that perhaps South Sydney needs to look in the mirror. But I don't think we've got to a situation where Latrell Mitchell has been a problem for 10 years off the field and this is his final straw. However, there are frustrations within the club about Latrell Mitchell and accountability, and I think he needs to answer those questions when he fronts the board, and there's no doubt Wayne needs Latrell Mitchell, and vice versa, Latrell needs Wayne.
Yeah, from me, again, take this situation away. A player will always have, a different relationship with coaches and board members and footy managers, and there might be some internal issues that happen within the club and within the team, but it's sort of taken care of within the club and within the team, and you never hear anything publicly about it. And then, obviously with Latrell, everything's public about Latrell. He's got the biggest profile in the game, but there was if you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I felt like there was an internal meeting about 6 or 7 weeks ago on the back of
the Sean Johnson
a couple of on-field issues. Some stuff that wasn't too bad off the field, but probably didn't look like he was doing the right thing by the club. And I remember he sat down and he had a meeting with them then. And I feel like in their head, that was their official, unofficial warning. He seemed to turn the corner.
But from a footy capacity, not from a grounds to sack him point of view.
No. That's what I mean.
From a footy point of view. And he responded, though, to be honest with you.
It was a line in the sand moment for the club. I feel like they got behind closed doors. They nutted it out. He refocused. And again, he turned the corner. He came back and they went on a run of winning games. He went and played Origin. He was brilliant in the game 2 down in Melbourne.
Yep.
But then, again, another issue has popped his head up after that agreement and that initial sit down. Now another issue has come up, and the club's got to the point where, okay, we're going to put an official note down. We're going to hit you with a breach. Now, this sits over you forever now. So if things happen down the track, it's not just behind the closed doors meeting anymore. There's actually a breach notice sitting on top of your contract. So it's time to really shape up now. Otherwise, again, if we keep going down this path, the club will have,
the way I think. If I'm South Sydney and I'm on the board there, I'm in their sort of high level administration, I'm sitting down with Latrell and just asking if he wants to play the game, what it means to him, like just the fundamental things. Like you can give him all of these rules and regulations and clauses in contracts, but if that guy isn't invested in being the player that we all know that he can be, well, then essentially he's probably better off walking away. And you know what, that would be a real shame for the game, but that's okay as well. If other things mean more to him in his life at this point, and he feels like he's been in the game long enough, and as you spoke about before, Wade, I mean, it's taken such a toll on him, like his personality and the work that he's doing away from the game and the battles that he's been involved in his 8 or 9 year career. Well, then, maybe that's what the club need to find out. They need to have an honest conversation around, what is he willing to sacrifice to be an NRL player, and what does it mean to him? Is he passionate about getting South Sydney, back to the top of the table where they believe to be? Does he want to work with Wayne Bennett? What is his legacy? Is he even care about things like that, or is he just that in the moment that for right now it feels like that he needs a break from the game and wants to walk away? They're the conversations I feel that South Sydney need to have with him and get some honest answers out of Latrell for where he sits right now.
Because they did have that conversation with him, and to be fair, he responded he responded really well after that Sean Johnson incident. And I'm slightly biased with him. I had that interview with him before Origin. I sat down with him, got to see Latrell in a different manner, and I got to know him reasonably well. Now, I think he acted in that period after that Sean Johnson incident. The reflection that you're asking for, he had that time, and he did. He came back, and it was great to see him playing good footy. He was happy. He was a good frame of mind. And unfortunately, and there are a lot of players that are in this category, when they get injured and footy can no longer be their focus and other distractions happen. That was the worst thing to happen to Latrell Mitchell, getting injured after Origin when he was playing so well. He was a good frame of mind. And to be fair, there were people bagging saying he wasn't at games. He was doing a clinic. I'm not excusing what he did, and he deserves to be punished for what he did, and it's a bad look for rugby league for him to be in that situation, and he needs to learn from that. But he was out there doing a clinic, and he was doing the right things, and the injury just couldn't have come at a worse time for him, and he needs to learn from that. And I think the questions that are going to be asked, or that you are asking now, I think he's answered them. I think he fell in love with the game again. He was ready to give everything, but he's made a mistake here and he has to pay the price for it.
Yeah, again, on the back of Gerds' point, I don't think he's probably on his own there at that South Sydney club who that question needs to be asked, because they're lost at the moment with their identity and what they want to be about and what they want to achieve, because less than 18 months ago, was it? They were leading the competition.
Yep.
They were leading the competition. Yeah. And I remember sitting here in this room saying, I think they can beat Penrith this year in a grand final. That's how good they were playing. So it's been a meteoric fall from grace. And he won't be the only one that needs to shape up November 1. And Bennett is obviously going to be a massive part of this, what he brings in, what he chats to with the players and the team about where do we seriously want to go. Because the talent they have on paper, there's Jack White and Cody Walker, Cam Murray, Kaloa Matongi, Latrell Mitchell, Campbell Graham's going to be back next year.
Lewis Dodd coming.
Now, they need to have a serious look at their program, their whole football program, and it might be the footy manager included, the board included, about how we're going to turn this program around, because no one can do it on their own. It takes everyone to buy into the direction and everyone to buy into the way forward.
But does Latrell need the father figure that Wayne Bennett seems to be? Because Gus, again, claiming that Latrell, he's an adult. He should be able to act responsibly and do those things independently of whether Wayne Bennett's looking over his shoulder and saying, no, you shouldn't be doing that.
Well, I think, again, that was the issue at the midpoint of the season when he had the first meeting. It was just the way his performance was being affected by other things outside of football, and you could tell he wasn't enjoying his football, and there was no major issues, really. There was just a lot of minor issues, and frustration would come up in the field, and he was getting suspended. And again, he is the focal point of that team because he's the best player, and he's probably the biggest profile in the game. Like, you look across it easily, and he's the man. So when issues are happening in and around him and he is then playing not at the best of his ability and getting suspended, the magnifying glass goes at him. But it's a whole team issue. Like, there's got to be, it's not just on him. He needs help around him as well. He needs to be better. Of course he does. But so do a lot of other guys in that team and organisation, including, again, like that organisation. They need to have a look at what they stand for and where they want to go, because they're all in at the moment.
Yeah. So well-deserved, Ron Coote becoming the 14th Immortal, and he's from the era where commentary was like that. And I think how Maroon should call it this afternoon. He was brilliant, Ron Coote, and it was great to see the tear in his eye and rolling down that cheek, having get that amazing honour of becoming the 14th Immortal. Did you enjoy that process?
Yeah, I did. I think, I love his selection. Obviously, it was a bit before my time, and I didn't get to see too much of him play. I watched that montage, and he certainly looked a fantastic player with the little highlights that are available, but his record speaks for itself. 4 premierships at South, 2 over at East when he went there. And I think, looking at it in all the Immortals up together, I like that it's a nod to the past. I think it's a nod to an era back, where there seems to be so many guys that we may have sort of gone past. And I love Joey. Joey was one of my favourite players growing up, and no doubt he would have been an Immortal at any time. Eventually, I just think it threw the timeline out a little bit when they named him so quickly after retirement. And there's so many candidates that it looked as if they may have been looked over, but this sort of writes the timeline a little bit. We give a nod to the past and we recognise someone from a different era. And just the whole night in general for me, when they named the Hall of Fame and then obviously the 14th Immortal, is just, we play footy because we love it to start with, and then you get to NRL and you want to have success and you want to have team success and you want to do the best you can as an individual with your team. But you look at that room, and that's just a room of excellence. Guys who were the top of their field.
Yeah.
The Hall of Fame guys who were just the best of the best. And then, to be named an Immortal, the best of the best of the best. It's just a fantastic room. It looked like a great night. And, congratulations to Ron Coote and his family and everyone who's supported him throughout his journey.
I guess, sorry guys, I guess that's always the question, isn't it? I mean, trying to compare eras, generational players when the game changes so much, the rules change, the physical nature of the contest change. So when we look at the nominees for the other night, the 14th, was anyone else from that generation? Was Ken Irvine, was he nominated? Who were, because it feels like to me that, as Wado said, it was a nod to the past, and we gave the award to a guy that had been nominated 4 or 5 times.
Yep.
But do we feel like now it is time to move on? And I know like Sterlo was nominated, and Lazo and Clydie, and
Brett
but
Kenny.
have we got anyone? Was there any other nominees from that era?
I think not. From what I gather, obviously we had the ones that were Cameron Smith, and I think Alfie was there, and Brett
but
Kenny.
From
From the Ron Coote era, I'm just going through it now. I don't think there were many that were that far back, to be honest with you. So,
You said that far back. I was in my teens when Ron Coote was running around. Enjoyed watching him play.
I stand by it.
Yeah, fair enough. And one of the great things about him, it was a very tough era in terms of the way the game was played. Yet he had that gentleman thing about him even then. He was a brilliant rugby league player, both attack and defence. His cover defence was compared with John Raper's at the time. He was a special player. But there's also the great photograph of him picking Graham Langlands up off the turf after that grand final in 1975 where the Roosters beat them 38-0, and there was the white boots, and he was a shattered man, and Ron Coote was the first one there to console him at the end of the game. Then, of course, the whole family of league thing was once Men of League or Family of League that he created, and has worked so hard for those guys who and families who struggle after careers in rugby league. So there's so much that is great about Ron Coote that makes that selection brilliant. Now, the question, you're absolutely right then, Gerds, is where do we now go? Are we still in? Does a Sterlo or a Brett Kenny, they're still in the frame? Steve Rogers, absolutely, indeed. Before we know that Cam Smith, the whole criteria was changed, so it was just 3 years after giving up the game.
It sort of feels with Cameron Smith, though, like it's inevitable that he's going to be one. So how long are we going to?
He has to be.
Yeah, there's no doubt about it. So it's just a matter of the people who are making the decisions and voting on it, which we won't get into. Maybe we will. Don't want to upset Joey, but the people who are voting on these things, are they just going to be like, well, let's give somebody else a chance who may not get another chance, and we wait for Cameron Smith for another 8 years because we know that eventually he's going to be in this group of people? I don't know the answer.
How long did Ron Coote wait?
Yeah.
40 odd years.
43
right?
years,
So, and again, I completely agree with your sentiments. I think Cam Smith is an immortal, and it's just a matter of time until we name him. But is it the next one when maybe we look back to that era of, say, Sterlo and Brett Kenny and we move along those lines, and then Cam could be the next one? I don't know. It's a hard question to answer. And again, like Gerds mentioned, comparing generations and who we missed, because it's so hard. Like, you got to be the one player of your generation, in my opinion. Like, you got to be the one who stood above everyone else, who you played with and against for however long you played for. And certainly we've been, this last generation who's just finished, we're talking about the Cam Smith era. We're spoiled with talented players who achieved so much in our game. Billy Slater, Cooper Cronk, Greg Inglis, Jonathan Thurston. Like, there's so many good choices. But above all them, Cam sits, right?
Yeah.
Cam sits. So.
And that's it, Wado. And like they've announced now that it's going to be like a 4-year cycle, but what if it doesn't warrant that? Like, we don't want to dilute what being an immortal is. And what if next time, like, if you took all of the nominees like you did the other night and you looked at all their CVs, well, doesn't it go to the guy with the greatest CV regardless of his time frame? Like, it isn't like, okay, well, Cam Smith's obviously going to be one. So say in 4 years they give it to Cam Smith, and then 4 years later they've got to give another one, but really no one can measure up to what Cam Smith's done. Where do they go from there? What then, do they start looking for different criterias?
Well, I think you can still go backwards. That's what happened after Joey when it went back eras for those we thought had missed out.
Who have we missed then?
Well, those guys that were nominated, the Sterlos and the Brett Kennys of the world, I think those are the kind of guys who would be in the conversation. And I think Wado made an interesting point. Like, you really have to be the best of that generation, right? That era.
Well, Wally was in that era, wasn't he?
Well, yeah. True.
Wally and Mal, aren't they that era?
well, the era
But
before Cam.
You're closing it down. You're closing the door.
No, I'm just saying, like, are we just, you know, like, I just don't want to dilute the product.
I wonder, like, because again, we talked about the selection process and who was a part of the selection process. It'd be interesting to see some transparency about what they do actually look at. Is it just your CV, or is it just things external to the game? And you talked about all the good Ron Coote did outside of the game with the Family League and then Men in League. I wonder what goes into the calculations when they're sitting there, and you're obviously you're looking at the resumes. They're all pretty good resumes.
Yeah.
So what gives one the nod over the other?
Yeah.
So it'd be, I don't know. Do you know any more about the criteria?
Nah,
you probably got more chance of voting on one than I do.
Yeah, mate, it's a media game, isn't it?
Is that wrong though? I mean, Andrew Johns was disappointed. I don't know for the other,
Yeah, look, I think they should. Definitely, I'm happy for the other members of the media who were part of the judging panel, but I think Joey Johns, who are the other,
Mal
and Wally, they should have been part of the process. There's no doubt about
Even
it.
a phone call, just a phone call to say.
Oh, they should have been part of it. Yeah, there's no doubt. I don't want to disrespect anyone who was involved, but whether it was an oversight or not, that they should have been part of it. And it was disappointing that Joey said what he said in the lead up. I wanted to ask you, Gerds. This might be controversial. But
Thanks, Chamo.
But is Nathan Cleary on the path to immortality?
I would say with Nath, like obviously with his club and the premierships, but I would say that there's probably another level that he needs to get to with his representative, the quality of his representative career so far. There's probably a couple of series that he really needs to own. I know he's won a World. Has he won a World Cup? Or he's won a World Cup. So yeah, you would say from a club perspective, he's certainly on the way. And what is he? 25 now? Is he?
I think he's a bit 26, maybe
26. But I would just say, look, like if you think about all of the guys that are there, they had elite representative careers. And I don't know, Wado, do you think Nate's had like an elite representative career so far?
Not at this stage. No, he's only just overtaken DCE to be halfback of Australia in recent times. So time is still on his side, and there's no doubt what he's done at Penrith, 3 premierships in a row. That in itself puts you on a level. But he has a bit more to do for New South Wales and for Australia to reach the heights that we're trying to talk about. But time is on his side, and a guy who you just made me think of when you're measuring up CVs. One that would go close to being very similar to Cam Smith would be Darren Lockyer, and what he did at the Broncos, what he did for Queensland, and what he did for Australia. And I know has he been nominated? How many times has he been nominated? But I think if we're going to sort of move past the nod to Tony's past, and we start looking back towards our past, I think someone like Lockyer, he certainly comes into the conversation, because I remember when that was my time to start watching footy, when he was playing fullback at the Broncos, and you wouldn't even have to know what the game of footy is. You could just sit down, never see the game before, and watch Darren Lockyer fullback for the Broncos, and you just knew he was the best player on the field. You didn't have to understand the game. He was just fantastic. And then the way he transitioned to 5'8" and dominated that position, again, how long he captained Australia for, how long he captained Queensland for. I don't know if his CV quite matches Cameron Smith, but it's pretty close.
I totally agree, Wado. Have we, boys, when we're talking about those different generations, there's always, have we got time, Tony, or do you need to go to a...
No, I need to go to the bathroom, obviously. I'm that old.
Okay.
Yeah, I can come back to that. I can still chew my own food, thanks, Wado.
Well, you didn't have lunch with us. I'm starting to get worried. Exactly. Don't worry, I'll come visit you in hospital, all right?
We'll pick this conversation up on the other side of the news. We'll get to the newsroom now. Here's Sophie Smith.
Thanks, guys, to NRLW first, and the Knights have celebrated a 20-point win over the Eels in Sydney this afternoon.